In the sweltering heat of 1901, on the remote Greek island of Antikythera, a sponge diver plunged beneath the waves and stumbled upon something that would baffle the modern world for over a century. Not gold, not jewels, but a heavily corroded stone tablet, one that seemed ordinary at first glance, until scholars realized it bore markings no one could decipher. It was covered in cryptic etchings, fragments of gears, and what looked like a mechanical calendar etched into stone. As archaeologists brushed away centuries of encrusted salt and decay, they uncovered more than just a relic. They uncovered a secret, one that pointed to a forgotten civilization, a society that vanished so completely, it left behind no cities, no monuments, no myths, just clues buried beneath layers of mystery. And the tablet? It wasn't just a map. It was a machine that shattered everything we thought we knew about ancient technology. This is the chilling true story of how one strange artifact unraveled a world long lost to time, and the dark theories that claim it never should have been found, because some knowledge is too dangerous to survive history. Now, let's begin the journey. It began with an accident. Elias Stadiatos, a sponge diver from the small Greek island of Symi, was diving off the coast of Antikythera in the spring of 1901 when a sudden storm forced his ship to anchor near an uncharted reef. As the waves crashed above, he plunged into the deep with his cumbersome diving suit, searching for sea sponges. But instead of soft corals and ocean floor flora, Elias descended into a nightmare of limbs. At first, he thought he had discovered a mass grave. Dozens of human forms lay scattered across the seabed, motionless and ghostly pale. But as he got closer, he realized they weren't bodies. They were statues. Marble torsos, shattered busts, and twisted bronze arms. Among the wreckage lay broken amphorae, coins, weapons, and something strange. Something out of place. A lump of rock that glittered strangely beneath the ocean moss. He brought it to the surface. Covered in barnacles and rust, it looked like nothing. But that lump would later be known as part of the Antikythera mechanism, a device so advanced, it would take over a century for scientists to even begin understanding it. It wasn't alone. Divers would later uncover more than 80 fragments of this bizarre object from the same wreck, a Roman-era shipwreck estimated to date back to around 70 BCE. But this was no ordinary Roman ship. Its cargo was far too eclectic, too elite. It carried Greek sculptures, Egyptian relics, Mesopotamian artifacts, and what looked like ancient technology. In the years that followed, Greek officials dismissed the mechanism as a one-off anomaly. A gear from a clock, perhaps, but clocks weren't invented until over 1,000 years later. So how could this be? X-rays revealed a jaw-dropping truth. The tablet wasn't just inscribed. It was engraved with interlocking gears, over 30 of them, alongside intricate Greek text, lunar phases, planetary motions, and eclipse predictions. This wasn't just a relic. It was a machine. The discovery sent shockwaves through the archaeological world. Had humanity been far more advanced in the ancient world than we ever imagined? Or was this an outlier, a fluke lost in time? Some refused to believe it was man-made at all. Others claimed it wasn't just ancient, it was forbidden. Because buried beneath the Mediterranean wasn't just a wrecked ship. Beneath the rust and coral, he noticed a greenish gear embedded in what looked like stone. But this wasn't stone, it was bronze. Inside the hardened mass were delicate, toothed wheels, so precise, so uniform, they looked like they belonged in a 19th-century clock tower. But this thing was over 2,000 years old. That was impossible. No ancient civilization should have had the knowledge to create something this complex. The Antikythera mechanism wasn't just one gear. It was a network of gears layered in tiers, each controlling another. Some moved forwards, others backwards. A differential gear, thought to be invented in the 13th century, was present here, more than 1,000 years ahead of its supposed debut. It predicted eclipses. It tracked the moon's irregular orbit. It calculated the metonic cycle, a 19-year period used to harmonize lunar and solar calendars. It even forecast the ancient Olympic Games. All of it in a shoebox-sized machine. And yet it had lain unnoticed for centuries, buried in the sea like a discarded toy. Even after its initial discovery, the mechanism was ignored for decades. The fragments gathered dust in museum drawers. Scholars didn't know what to make of it. The problem wasn't just complexity, it was historical contradiction. This kind of analog computing device simply shouldn't have existed. Not then. Not in ancient Greece. Mainstream historians dismissed it as an oddity, a quirk, maybe a sophisticated astrolabe, maybe part of a clock brought by later travelers. But every carbon test, every inscription, every accompanying artifact confirmed the same thing. This machine was built between 150 and 100 BCE. The question wasn't what it was. It was who built it and why. In 1951, British science historian Derek de Sala Price began obsessively studying the device. He spent decades analyzing every fragment. When he published his findings in the 1970s, the academic world was stunned. Price concluded that the Antikythera mechanism was not a toy or a curiosity. It was a full-fledged analog computer designed to model the movements of the heavens. But who in the ancient world could engineer that? Pythagoras? Archimedes? Were these just mathematicians, or something more? Some theorists believe the mechanism was proof that human history was not linear, but cyclical. That knowledge had been gained and lost before. That civilization had peaked once, long ago, and then collapsed into ignorance. Others took it even further. They claimed it wasn't built by Greeks at all, but by a civilization even more ancient. One erased from memory. Atlantis. Their argument was simple. No other known artifact from that period matches this level of technological sophistication. None. The Antikythera mechanism stands utterly alone. A fluke or a fragment of a lost global knowledge system. A leak in the timeline of human progress. But as more fragments were scanned, another mystery emerged. Engraved deep within the mechanism, hidden between rotating gear teeth and oxidized copper plates, were strange markings that didn't match known Greek calendars. They weren't just technical, they were philosophical, ritualistic, as if this device wasn't just for calculation, but for communion. With what? That's when a new theory surfaced, one that disturbed even the most rational scholars. Maybe it wasn't a tool of science. Maybe it was a tool of prophecy. To understand the true purpose of the Antikythera mechanism, we need to go beyond science, into the realm of prophecy, ritual, and ancient belief. Because while modern researchers saw it as a calculator, the ancients may have seen it as something far more sacred. The inscriptions on the device refer not just to astronomical cycles, but to divine events. Eclipses weren't mere shadows. They were omens. The color of the moon during an eclipse was believed to predict famine, plague, or war. And the mechanism didn't just calculate these, it named them. Red eclipse, bloodshed, pale eclipse, disease, a black moon, death of kings. These weren't predictions. They were pronouncements. Now remember, the Greeks weren't strangers to prophecy. In fact, one of the most powerful institutions in their world was the Oracle of Delphi. She sat atop a sacred mountain, inhaling intoxicating fumes that seeped from the earth, and delivered cryptic messages from the gods. Rulers, generals, and philosophers traveled from across the ancient world just to hear her whispers. But what if the oracle's messages weren't just mystical? What if they were mechanical? Recent studies show that the oracle's chamber was located directly above a geological fault that released ethylene gas, a powerful hallucinogen. But some believe the Antikythera mechanism was part of a Delphic priesthood ritual, a hidden device used by temple elites to manufacture divine messages with the illusion of supernatural accuracy. Think about it. If you could predict the heavens, you could predict fate. And if you could predict fate, you could control power. Historians found that certain panels on the mechanism were marked with names of cities, Delphi, Olympia, Nemea, and more. Not just astronomical data, but geopolitical mapping. The mechanism could determine the most auspicious time for a war, a coronation, or a marriage, all under the guise of divine will. This wasn't a tool of reason. It was a weapon of belief. And belief, in the ancient world, was more powerful than any army. But here's where it gets darker. Because the mechanism doesn't just calculate natural cycles. It includes a 54-year Saros dial, used to predict solar and lunar eclipses. That same cycle appears in Babylonian star charts. But the Greeks didn't invent it. They inherited it. Which means the knowledge behind this device may have passed through multiple civilizations, like a sacred transmission. Each link in the chain, Babylon, Egypt, Greece, adding to the design, perfecting it, encrypting it. Until finally, someone built it, not to share with the masses, but to guard the heavens. And then, it vanished, only to resurface 2,000 years later, encrusted with barnacles, whispering a forgotten language of gears. Some say the priests of Delphi knew its power was too great, so they sank it. Others claim it was stolen by a rival faction of philosophers, trying to smuggle it to Rome before being caught in the shipwreck. But one inscription still haunts researchers today. Carved in worn Greek, around one of the eclipse prediction dials, are the chilling words, "When the shadows return, so shall the silence." Was it a warning, a prophecy, or a command? Because here's the real question. If this survived, what else have we lost beneath the waves? Here's a chilling thought. What if the Antikythera mechanism wasn't unique? What if it was just one of many? Because the deeper historians dig, the clearer one unsettling pattern becomes. Humanity may have built this level of technology before and then lost it. Let's look at the evidence. The Antikythera mechanism was created around 150 BCE, but its sophistication suggests it had precursors. You don't create a Rolex without first mastering sundials, gears, and metallurgy. So where are the prototypes? Gone. Melted down. Lost to war. Drowned in earthquakes and tsunamis. Or worse, deliberately destroyed. Ancient writers spoke of earlier devices that could track the stars or sing with the heavens. Cicero, writing in 1st century BCE, described a machine built by Archimedes that modeled the movements of the sun, moon, and planets. He called it miraculous. Where is it? Gone. Pliny the Elder referenced celestial spheres used by priests in Alexandria. Gone. In 391 AD, when Christian zealots destroyed the Library of Alexandria, they didn't just burn scrolls, they erased timelines. Knowledge of mechanics, medicine, chemistry, centuries of progress, obliterated in days. So the Antikythera mechanism might not be an invention. It might be a survivor. A glitch in history's great reset. Think of the implications. This means human civilization might not be on a steady climb upward. It might be a cycle, a loop of innovation, collapse, and rebirth. A timeline that folds back on itself like gears inside a cosmic machine. A pattern hidden in plain sight. And if that's true, what else have we forgotten? What other machines, codes, or rituals lie beneath the sands of Mesopotamia, the jungles of Cambodia, or the sunken stones of Dvarka? What if the Antikythera mechanism is not a relic? What if it's a clue? A breadcrumb left by a previous age, to test if we are smart enough to remember. And here's the terrifying possibility. Maybe we're not. Maybe we're just playing with fragments of truths we no longer understand. Because, as one researcher said, we deciphered the gears, but we never asked why they were made. That question still lingers, tick by tick, rotation by rotation. What was the real purpose of the mechanism? To calculate? To manipulate? Or to warn? Because the stars it tracked still move. The eclipses still come. And the silence still waits. The discovery came quietly. No breaking news. No press conference. Just a hushed paper in a peer-reviewed journal and a ripple of dread through the halls of academia. Because someone noticed something strange. The Antikythera mechanism didn't just chart celestial movements. It mapped cycles. Not just astronomical cycles, but geological ones. Buried within its gear ratios were patterns eerily aligned with solar minima, volcanic winters, and even civilizational collapses. Every 11 years. Every 54 years. Every 223 months. These were not random. This was predictive. One gear, now dubbed the glyph disk, appeared at first to be decorative, until it was compared to Babylonian eclipse tables. The result? A perfect match. Another gear, one that spun 3 times for every 5 turns of its neighbor, mirrored the lunar metonic cycle used to align lunar and solar calendars, a cycle that ancient Chinese dynasties tied to crop failure, famine, and revolt. This wasn't a calendar. This was a warning system. And it gets darker. In 2023, an AI-enhanced imaging system at the University of Edinburgh revealed previously unseen etchings on one of the inner plates. They weren't in Greek. They were non-alphabetic symbols, swirls and notches, almost like circuit diagrams. They resembled pre-Sumerian carvings found at Göbekli Tepe, thousands of years older than the Antikythera wreck. How? That's when the theory exploded. What if the Antikythera mechanism wasn't built by the Greeks, but inherited by them? What if this machine was a copy, a reconstruction of a device from a lost civilization? One that encoded knowledge far beyond its time. A blueprint not just of the stars, but of time itself, of catastrophe, of cycles, of reset. And the theory many historians dared not publish? That the mechanism was part of a system, a network of machines. Scattered, submerged, stolen, suppressed. Some believe there were others, one rumored in India, another in the Andes, and a third said to have been seized during the Crusades. If true, that would make the Antikythera mechanism not a fluke, but a node in a global system of ancient data gathering, and perhaps even control. A planetary operating system for a civilization we no longer remember. Which raises the final, most haunting question: who was it made for? Because the mechanism's complexity isn't just about genius. It's about intention. No one builds something this intricate without a purpose. And maybe, just maybe, the reason we can't fully decode it isn't because it's too old, but because it was never meant for us. The final pieces didn't come from Greece. They came from Switzerland, inside a lab that builds precision satellite instruments for the European Space Agency. A group of engineers were tasked with modeling the Antikythera mechanism using atomic-scale simulations. What they found terrified them, because when they replicated the gear alignments, not just statically, but dynamically, running simulations over centuries, they noticed drift corrections. Micro-adjustments that accounted for the moon's elliptical orbit thousands of years into the future. This wasn't just predictive, it was prescient. Then came the final shock. Inside the mechanism's structure was a nonlinear gearing system, one that had no precedent in known ancient engineering until the 17th century. Yet there it was, embedded in bronze, 2,000 years earlier. So how did it get there? Enter Dr. Eleni Drakakis, a physicist turned historical systems analyst, who noticed something chilling in the gear ratios, a pattern matching what's now known as the Chandler wobble, a subtle shift in Earth's rotational axis that wasn't even discovered until the late 19th century. And here it was, encoded in a mechanism pulled from the sea in 1901. It gets stranger. The mechanism, when recalibrated for modern astronomical data, still works. It correctly predicts lunar eclipses, planetary retrogrades, and even solar irregularities. The only problem? It ends. The last viable cycle terminates around the year 2089. After that, nothing. No more celestial movements. No more recorded eclipses. No future calculations. The mechanism goes silent. Some believe it's just a mechanical limitation. Others aren't so sure. One researcher at the Max Planck Institute for the History of Science put it bluntly: this is not just an artifact. It's a message we haven't finished decoding. And maybe never will. Because there's a growing whisper in the academic underground that the Antikythera mechanism wasn't just a machine. It was a countdown. And when it stops, something begins. The Antikythera mechanism has defied logic, rewritten history, and exposed cracks in everything we thought we knew about the ancient world. Was it a tool? A warning? A relic from a lost civilization? Or is it something else entirely, something we weren't meant to find? If this shook your perception of history, there's more. Because this is just one artifact, and the next one might change everything. Subscribe for deep, disturbing dives into the secrets the past tried to bury. Turn on notifications, because the next ancient mystery we uncover might rewrite your reality.